Rich Stockdale, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Hello, hello. So you founded Oxygen Conservation in 2021. You're a data science guy. Hell yeah.
Amongst other things, yeah.
A well-liked, innovative leader. Someone who always wears a smile. That's my perspective of you. Someone with relentless determination. And that determination is to make natural capital a mainstream asset class with a pretty ambitious target of £1 billion worth of assets by 2030, I believe. We've known each other for a little while. And it's wicked to have seen the rise of oxygen conservation because I think, I've seen it almost from the get-go, which is amazing. And I know that we're not going to have a problem with having conversations today because I spoke on your podcast a few months ago, and I'm sure that this is going to go in all sorts of different directions. But would you say that intro is a good intro, or who is Rich Stockdale?
Who actually has an answer to that question, right? Different people every day. I think all those things are true and have been various chapters of what I do. I'd also add on there failed athlete, husband, father. I think we're all different people depending what time of the day it is as well. Like if you're at my house at 6 a.m, you're going to see the meathead weightlifter with a hoodie on in the garage throwing weights around. If you come late at night, you're going to see me reading Harry Potter to my kids. So I think we're all different people depending on the hat we need to wear.
I love that. So since speaking on your podcast, I went and actually spoke on a really, really interesting podcast. And big ups Nup if she's listening. And she asked me this question on the Impact Game Changers podcast, which I thought was really interesting. And I'm going to kick off with this question, mainly because you also you got into it when we were chatting. So
I love the borrowing from the people who are doing awesome stuff in the sector. That's great. Yeah,
beg, borrow and steal, right? The question was, what was the best split-second decision you've ever made?
That is a phenomenal question. Giving my phone number to my now wife. So, hey, sweetie. I don't know if I've ever told this story on camera before. So we met outside a nightclub that she shouldn't have been at yet, dropped off by her father, so it's his fault. I'm not a drinker, but I was at a friend's birthday party while at university. I'd had one too many vodka jellies, got a tap on the shoulder. I was being quite boisterous from this stunningly beautiful blonde lady saying, "Shut up, nobody cares." And that has been the story of our marriage. And 17, 18 years later, I'm very, very fortunate. She was quite an intense human being when I was at university, and Helen has certainly made me a far, far better person. So any decision that relates to Helen is definitely the best one.
I don't think that there is going to be many podcasts in the natural capital space which kick off with vodka jellies.
I mean, it was chapters of life, right? It was a while ago.
So talking about chapters of life, I'm really interested, and we'll get into what the hell is natural capital in a little while. But transport us back to the early stages of you connecting with nature. What did it smell like? What did it sound like? Really paint us a picture of the seasons, the visuals, like anything that really stood out, that first moment of connection.
Kayaking off a 12-foot waterfall and going from, for people who haven't kayaked whitewater before, it is an unbelievable experience because it hits every sense. It's temperature, it's smell, it's noise. As you're paddling up, there's a ferocity, there's a loudness of the water that gets louder and louder until you hit the edge of a waterfall, and then it's silence as you fall. And then if you do it either well or badly, you end up underwater a good way as you break the surface. And if you look up through the water in a beautiful river environment, it's golden. So you're looking up through light, and there's a smell to that water. There's like a peatiness, a freshness to it. And it wasn't until years later I realized my time spent whitewater kayaking as a teenager allowed me to explore genuine wild places that people hadn't got to and damaged and impacted. And this is in, as my 8-year-old daughter would mock me, the 1990s, which is doesn't seem like that long ago, but is. That was before sewerage pollution had really hit home. I mean, there would have been some issues there, but we didn't know. And we'd, swim and kayak and love the waters there. And really, that was my connection to the environment. And if it hadn't have been for that, that wouldn't have led to geography and PhD in data and environmental stuff. So falling off that waterfall was the very beginning.
Where's the best place to get in a kayak or a canoe in the UK?
Chapters of life, but a couple of different experiences that stand out. That one was on the River Tees in Northumberland, in Northumberland way out, Durham. Also, during my time at uni, I kayaked a place called the Alta Muron, which is a river in Scotland up near Glencoe, I think, and it only runs in really big flood waters. And that was just massive waterfall after massive waterfall, and that was exhilarating. And then surf kayaking's pretty fabulous as well. So,
surf kayaking,
yeah.
What so as in like on an ocean kayak?
Yeah. Well, no, on what they call them play boats, so really short stunt kayaks, but out in the sea surfing like that. And it's akin to surfing on a board, but you'd have to stand up, so it's a lot easier. But you can get some really amazing aerials and flips and stunts in it. I was never that good. We're hoping to get, there's a British world champion that does this. She's an incredible lady. We've invited her on the podcast. So if she's listening to this, shout out, you're incredible, OT. The only female kayaker in the world that beats all the men. She's an amazing athlete and British, and we should be really proud of her.
And if you could, if you go and kayak one river in the world, what would it be?
I just need to get back in a boat. It's been a long time. Every couple of years, I jump back in and play around a little. I've got such a soft spot for the US, so I want to be across in Colorado at some point.
Yeah.
Wouldn't an OC US version be interesting?
So tell us about oxygen conservation. Like, what is your mission? What the hell is natural capital? Give us your insight.
Natural capital's everything around us. It's air, it's water, it's the very thing that gives us life on Earth. And for so long, we've just completely disregarded it and thought it's worthless. So my view is the reason we've got a climate crisis and a biodiversity crisis is we've failed to put a price on carbon. We've failed to put a price on the negative impacts of what we do. So if you were going to fill up your diesel car right now and there was £1,000 tax for doing it because of the pollution you're putting into the environment, everyone would have been driving electric cars for years. We haven't priced the consequence of what we do. It's cheaper for the water companies to put sewage in our rivers and lakes and lochs than it is to do anything about it. That's why they do it. Finance is a fantastic mechanism for incentivizing behaviors. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's way better than the system we've got at the moment. So natural capital for us is about restoring ecosystems, about restoring natural processes, clean rivers, fresh air, clean water, more trees, better biodiversity, restored habitats, pulling back all the negative people have done to society. And that's what we set off to do. So I'm hugely fortunate to work with the incredible Oxygen House Group, which is a private equity and venture capital group out of Exeter, who are committed to making a sustainable, positive impact on the planet. We set off in June 21 with a mission to scale conservation. So most founder stories are a kind of a collection of their past experience. So it draws from my love of nature, my love of data, my love of failing at high performance sports and trying to be an athlete, but those cultural norms that brought together the ethos of what we are, and a love for everything Silicon Valley. So I really got into reading and business through the lenses of things like Chaos Monkeys, the books, and Work Rules by Laszlo Bock. And I observed the growth of those businesses from like ideas in that sector through to ginormous businesses. So trying to apply some of those principles. So yeah, we set off 2021 with a vision of scaling conservation, bringing a professional, exciting business focus to the environment sector, because it's a lovely, lovely place to work, but it's pretty much the purview of the retiree. It's really laid back. The Trust, the Rivers Trust, the Wildlife Trust are incredible organizations. Thank you for everything you do. But they're not meant to change the game. They're meant to keep things as they are and sustain them, whereas we want to change that. So in the last 3 years, we've purchased nearly 45,000 acres of land to build a natural capital portfolio valued around £150 million. Now, if you go back before OC started, a big environmental project was £50,000 or £100,000. We've changed the game.
Yeah.
We want that to be, I've always talked about wanting it to be the world's biggest alternative asset class and making it a meaningful asset class. People have started to stop me now and go, it is? It's a 150 million asset with you guys alone. Nattergal have built an amazing portfolio of 50, 60 million pounds for them. Nature is an asset class, and the companies and the funding that are flowing into this space is incredible. And our plan, our big goal, we're going to continue to buy land, and we're going to bring what we call Portfolio One to market in 2027, and we're going to sell that for £500 million. And if we've done that, the market is made.
Yeah.
If there is a transaction at £500 million that is globally significant, and no one can doubt that natural capital is an asset class, and then we're flying. Because if we can achieve that, the startups, the new businesses that are popping up in this, and we're seeing it now. Every week I get an email from a new founder going, I look at this part of the data, or I can help you with tree supply, or we do this amazing thing in crowdsourcing ecology. That's why we started our podcast, to showcase all those businesses, because we want to scale conservation, not just oxygen conservation.
That's really, really interesting. And so, like, what is your perspective on the market? Yes, you're coming in and shaking up the game. I guess my pretty limited view is that there's almost like a bit of a supply and demand issue at the moment. What's your perspective on the market?
So we're going to go back to the tech world for this analogy. We're in the age of dial-up internet. The first few people, if you equate natural capital to how the curve of the internet developed, we're at the time of dial-up. The first few people have got a router and know how to get on the internet. We are so early. We're 10 years away from mass adoption and from the tools and techniques and the processes that investors need to dive in. We don't have the confidence yet for buyers to be able to know, when I'm buying a carbon credit, I know it's meaningful, it's real. And that's why our commitment is to set a bar so high. We want to put natural capital products, so carbon credits and biodiversity units, into the market that are the equivalent of the impact to the Tesla Model S. Do you remember before the Tesla came out, electric cars were a joke?
Yeah.
It was a milk float. You were mocked, right? The Prius had come out and it was intentionally ugly so that people noticed it, but it was it didn't move the needle at all. We want to be that Tesla Model S. We want to put out natural capital products that are so good and so trustworthy that it changes the game. I've always loved those moments in sport that make a leap forward in a moment. So you get you'll get a cricket player that comes in and be the first person who hits the ball over their head. You get Lionel Messi arrives and just transcendent. You can jump sometimes in business and in sport and life. You can jump a decade in a moment, and that's what we're trying to do. That's
really, really interesting. And I mean, who are the types of organizations that are going to make that leap happen? Like I'm interested in things like carbon credits. Like, what are the types of companies that should be buying carbon credits?
Microsoft and Google and the coalition around them have bought millions and millions globally already. This is a massive market globally and is only going to increase. I think in the UK, we have a unique proposition because the way we view the environment, whilst internally we might say we don't protect it enough, the rest of the world thinks we're amazing at this in comparison. So our levels of regulation, environmental due diligence, and how we think about things. So we can offer a product that's unique and really, really special. We can be for carbon credits what champagne is for wine. We can be that unique proposition. So I think the ones that are going to make the market for us is when that institutional investment steps in. So at the moment, we've been very fortunate to work with a venture capital firm. What I love about the phrase venture capital, it comes from adventure capital originally.
Right.
And I hadn't clicked this until really recently. But it's the forward-thinking, really brave family offices and individuals that are creating these exciting industries. And again, that's why you've got echoes of Silicon Valley and the tech world. But I think if we can do the transaction we're talking about, when we make that sale, it will be the BlackRocks of this world, the Phoenix, that big pension funds, investment houses that are in a position, and that's why scale is really important. So the environment sector for so long has said, we want private capital to be in here, but it's been asking for checks that aren't worth these institutions writing. That's why we need a scale way north of $250 million. It needs to be at $500 million to make those really significant investors who are sophisticated and knowledgeable to really step in and make that purchase. And they themselves will be the people who are best placed to deal with, to create the markets around premium natural capital products.
Yeah, I'm really interested to dive into that perspective around, the UK almost being the Champagne region in a second. But it's really funny, isn't it? Because when we put a monetary value on things, it makes sense that we should be protecting whatever it might be.
Some people find that morally difficult when it comes to the environment.
Yeah. Well, what's your perspective on it?
We've tried not putting a value on it. How's that gone? If you don't value something, it's worthless. There's so much psychological research that shows if you charge someone £1 for something as opposed to making it free, their relationship with it is way different and way more valuable and way more connected and purposeful.
But that sounds like it, like in the now that works, because I think you could put a very, very clear perspective to any one of those businesses that you've just mentioned to say, well, if you invest now, effectively economies of scale, it's going to be way cheaper for you to invest now than in 5-10 years time when you're going to need to invest. And effectively everything's more expensive, not just the actual credits themselves, but the lawyers, the organizations, the specialists, the experts, they're going to be more in demand. It's coming, right? So why aren't people jumping and flooding into the market now?
The sector isn't ready. We haven't. So if we go back to my internet analogy, you can now pay for anything on your phone. When the internet first started, no one would give their card details to anyone. There was no safety, no security, no mechanisms. We needed the first .com boom and bust to happen for all the super smart guys and girls and kids in Silicon Valley to come up with all the infrastructure at the back end of the internet that no one knows how it works. I don't know how it's safe for me to pay for stuff with PayPal, but it is, and I'm confident. And I don't know how the banking security works, and I don't know how the switching protocol works between routers and data security and storage, but all that stuff happens. We haven't built it for the natural capital sector yet, and we haven't seen a cycle of this stuff. So until we can actually demonstrate, what does it mean to buy a credit? What do these contracts actually look like? What do I get in the end? What happens if it goes wrong? Some of the big insurers, for example, have just started producing insurance for the developer of carbon credits. So up until recently, the buyer could purchase an insurance, but the developer couldn't. So right now, we have quotes sitting on our desk that we could insure our credits. Well, if you can't insure an asset, is it an asset yet? So we're just so early.
Interesting.
The reason people know lots about it is because of people like you and others who are talking and asking the questions. But it's so early. We've got so far left to go.
So there's a trust problem.
Of course, there's an integrity problem with everything because there's just not the longevity, the education, the awareness of it. And international markets as well have been really challenging with that. So people say, well, I can buy this really cheap carbon credit on the other side of the world for $1, but it might not be very good. Well, of course it isn't. It's incredibly cheap. If it's too cheap, how can you trust it? Our carbon products will be reassuringly expensive. Because you can come and see them, touch them, feel them. Go back to a car analogy. You can buy a terrible car or you can buy a Tesla if you wish. There is a market, and that's the beauty of markets, that you can buy on a price point differentiator, but you're going to pay more for a premium product. And that's what we can offer in the UK. That the limited landmass we've got as well makes that really special because we cannot compete on price and shouldn't for carbon credits because we don't have millions and we don't have the hundreds of millions of acres that some other countries do. So we need to make sure we use the land in the right way. And that also goes to a point about land we buy. So, we don't buy high quality farmland. We're buying grouse moors and land that's been hammered and degraded and needs restoration. There's a place for farmers, food and conservation.
Yeah, I mean, look at the bottom of all of that. It really is a comms, and it's actually a brand challenge more than anything.
Carbon credits. A brilliant marketer like yourself said to me, if we'd have called voluntary carbon markets the private carbon market, we wouldn't have had a problem.
Right.
But because the word voluntary is in there, people think they can choose not to do it. It's not. It's a private market. And in the next 18 months or so, we're going to see a convergence between the mandatory regulated market and the voluntary. So the voluntary will largely shrink away as more and more businesses become regulated. You said it's coming and building. In 10, 15 years' time, every industry is going to be paying a planet tax, a carbon tax. There's going to be a levy on the industries that are having the most impact. And yes, it's aviation and big infrastructure at the moment, but it's going to become all of us.
So if you were a brand guy right now, what would you change?
I mean, I think I am a brand guy. I think that's kind of
You definitely are.
That's
a
kind of
brand
my
guy.
role, isn't it?
Okay, so
what we're trying to do is elevate that sector and say it is about quality. It's about transparency. It's why we are so transparent about everything. So an example of this would be you will never see an image or a video that comes from OC that Josh or the team haven't produced, because if I use stock footage, what else am I lying about? So I have to be honest about every aspect of what we're doing and be transparent about it. So I'd ask everyone to do the same. And that is what's great about this sector. So Nattergal, Rebalance Earth, Restore, they're all committed to sharing and developing and growing the whole sector because we need to. Because if I try and build trust in a sector by undermining the other people in it, we're going to go nowhere. We have to celebrate the good and showcase that. So that's something that's changed in the environment sector in the last 3 years. It is a far more collaborative environment.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean lazy. We're all competitive with ourselves and with climate change and with the biodiversity crisis and loss, but not with each other. We're supporting each other as we do that.
Yeah, I love
if you
that.
want to go far, go together, right?
Yeah, 100% collaboration, not competition, and that's really fascinating, isn't it? Because that is brand, that is the essence of this industry. It's not business as usual, but you've still got that competitive streak.
Business
right?
unusual, right? Business unusual.
So I'm intrigued to go back to that view a little bit of the UK and the brilliant organisations in this space. That biodiversity net gain is perceived by a lot of European friends of mine, speaking just a few months ago in Italy, and they look at it almost as this initiative that is completely pioneering for the world. Do you think that the launch of biodiversity net gain was successful?
So there is a precursor to it. So there's water trading markets in the US that essentially 20 years ago followed a similar route. They're barely talked about. And I was introduced to a gentleman over there who he has raised over $1 billion for nature based on water trading markets.
Right.
So that's the ability to water supply situations. So keeping water in environments to allow it to be extracted elsewhere. So fascinating industry that people don't know a lot about. Is it pioneering? Yes, I think it is. I'm always quite cynical about the public sector, having spent a lot of time there and seeing that there is quite a lot of people who don't do very much. However,
Sound like Elon Musk.
it's true. Yes, minister is true. If you haven't lived and worked in them, and the thing is, everybody knows as well. You walk into those organisations and they know. They literally know. In business, one of my rules is everybody knows. You know the people that are great, and you know the people who don't do anything. It's just in private sector we deal with it. In the public, you don't. Anyway, I was really sceptical about how it'd be launched and how it would come out, and I ended up, the thing that changed for me, I spoke on a panel with a lead environmentalist and economist from DEFRA. And the audience were incredibly rude. They were lambasting this person, saying, "You're not doing this, guidance isn't coming fast enough, rah, rah." And I was like, this isn't okay. And I started having to go back at the audience going, let's just be very clear. They're going to publish this guidance. Then we're going to tell them it's terrible and it's wrong anyway. So you don't really want it, do you? And half the audience were like, yeah, he's right. Actually, we don't want it, because it's an impossible task. If you try and generalize something and put a set of rules that apply, we have 40 plus different habitat types just across our portfolio. So that's just us. So a set of rules that fit 40 different habitats in however many situations, times that by 100, and that's the permutations they're trying to deal with. So again, I think it's been hugely successful in terms of gravitating people's attention to making natural capital measurable and meaningful and putting a monetary value on it and giving developers a consequence of what they're doing. It's so early. It needs another 9-10 years to develop. The first Teslas weren't as good as the current ones. First internet dial-up was terrible. Google didn't come until the 21st search engine. We need to develop and iterate and improve. But boy, I'm glad they've done it. And I think what will be really exciting is as we see the private version of that develop in Scotland, because they haven't got a BNG framework, we'll have that co-development, concurrent development, private and governmental market. So that'll be interesting. Is it perfect? No. Do we all need to help move it along and improve it? Yes, but I'm really glad it's here.
Yeah, and I think the most interesting thing for me is that For the first time in the kind of 13, 14 years that I've been going to sustainability events, you've just got different people in the room, you know, from solicitors to ecologists, accountants, a real broad spectrum of people coming to biodiversity net gain breakfasts and coming to sustainability events and rubbing shoulders with different people with different perspectives. That's actually the biggest win in my eyes. But it does feel like there is a general mood that anything that is innovative is, there's almost like a want for it to fail, which is a real shame in today's society. There's a lot of like people looking at the negatives rather than the positives. And I think it's because it almost feels like we're still searching for this silver bullet effect. Like everyone's just kind of waiting. And that might even be the reason why people aren't flooding into this natural capital market at the rates that some people in the space might be wanting them to. It's because they're thinking it should be like this silver bullet.
I mean, we're not ready for the investment. Like the sector isn't. So if you were an investor right now and you said, we have to bear in mind the level of investment these institutions and significant capital houses have. A minimum ticket for a lot of them is 50, 100 million pounds because the efficiency of management, they get paid on such a fraction. So these fund managers will be on 0.something% to manage that money. So it's a really small fee to manage it. So they've got to deploy it in significant chunks. They can't write small checks. So as a sector, you can't put 100 million in it right now. There's literally nowhere for it to go.
Interesting.
So the single biggest check outside of OC that I'm aware that's been written is by Aviva putting 40 million into Nattergal. Great job, Nattergal. Great job, Aviva. It's brilliant for the sector. That's the biggest investment. So until we're ready for it, we can't say, please invest in us, because a sector prior to the last couple of years hasn't invested in itself. I wrote a piece about how for so long people are expected to work for free in the environment sector before you can get a job. Well, if we're not prepared to invest in our people, why should a private investor invest in us? Now that's changing. That is absolutely changing. Your point on innovation, I kind of like the criticism and the attack of it, because otherwise you're just vanilla ice cream. So no one's crossing the road for vanilla ice cream. No one minds vanilla ice cream. That's what the public sector's meant to do. Whereas, I'd rather have chocolate chip cookie dough, right? Like let's be exciting, let's be different. But I almost think, and this maybe comes from my love of professional wrestling as a kid, you just want energy. That energy can be overwhelmingly positive, or it can actually be overwhelmingly challenging, but you need to solicit a response, an enthusiasm, and attention if you want to create change. Like, have you seen that Jaguar advert that's come out at the moment? Where are you on that?
Who hasn't?
So I haven't seen the whole thing. I've seen bits of it, and I've seen the car they've just released that looks like something out of Thunderbirds.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
Okay. So, first of all, I'm a brand guy like you are.
Well, you're a professional brand guy. I'm just an enthusiast.
But I agree with you, right? Nobody wants vanilla ice cream. You always want chocolate chip cookie dough. And to me, that's why I'm interested by this space, is because there is a lot of energy and hope for a want of change, but communications and brand is at the heart of actually making this thing interesting. And we don't have time for us to wait for it to be good. If you look at Oatly, right? Oatly's been going for decades, and it used to sit on the bottom shelf, unrefrigerated in Holland and Barrett, with a really boring brand identity. And now it is like a super brand based out of creativity. And that's brand. It's how you show up in the market and the intentions for you to completely build a new category. Jaguar is really interesting because it's unexpected, right? And at the heart of brand is unexpectedness. And it is, like, I'm also like a commercially minded environmentalist. So I'm always thinking about like the future of the market. Jaguar's sales have been declining. I think it was like 69% over the last like 5 years. They're at a position where they have to go fully unexpected, and they've properly lent into that. So I quite like that. But, there's also heritage to that brand that Yeah, I don't know. I'm in a position of like fair play for the boldness. Will it work? Let's see.
I literally said the same thing this morning. I think there's more to come. So I've no idea. Do I think that pink car is going to be rocking around on the streets in its shape and form? No, I don't. However, I love the boldness. I love the need to innovate and change things. But equally, yeah, like you, two minds. I love the heritage, and that we were talking about this before we started recording. Like, we record our podcast in a historic shoot room, which I love, but also I like the new and the innovative as well. So yeah, it's an exciting transition, but I think there is more to come from them, and it's an interesting story that'll map its way through. You used the word hope when you were talking before about the sector. I think the thing that gives me the most amazing hope, so we've just closed our intern program for next year. We've got 2,000 applicants for 5 intern roles. And that's how I think my biggest test of my organic reach and brand of the company is at the moment. The amount of incredibly talented young people that are fighting to come and work with us. And that's what gives me hope for the sector. You know, we've got an intern at the moment, top first out of Exeter at geography, amazing person. There's not a chance she'd have been working in the environment sector 3 years ago. She'd have been grabbed by a big 4 consultancy, accountancy firm, bank or something. But these people who are that talented now want to be in the environment sector. We had tens of people with Oxbridge first being like, I just want to work in something that matters. Purpose is more important to me than anything else. And you mentioned about Oatly being on the bottom shelf for decades. We're still on the bottom shelf as a sector. You know, I'm reaching for the top shelf and front of the shop, but as a sector, we're so early. We're still figuring it out.
What needs to happen for this space to become like front of mind, top of brain?
Time. So the thing the planet hasn't got right, time. Changing environments takes time. So if you acquire a significant estate in Scotland, from the day you first see it to trees being planted in the ground, the fastest you can do that's 3 years with permissions, and a chunk of that is making sure you do the right surveys and you understand the environment, so you ensure what you're doing is all positive, because just blanket planting trees everywhere isn't the answer. It's the right type of environmental intervention, and sometimes that means doing very little, sometimes it means doing a lot. As a society and a species, we need to act really fast, but nature doesn't care about our timeline. It'll change in the seasons it wants to. So we need time, we need examples, and we need brilliant stories, which is what we're bringing forward to try and inspire people. And while we're waiting and letting each landscape come on, that's why we've been fortunate that across the 11 estates we've got so far, we've bought them sort of quarterly throughout the last 3 years. So each one's at a different phase in a different part of the country, in a different habitat. So we've got land from Cornwall to the Highlands, from the flatlands in Norfolk across the Welsh coast. So hopefully anyone who interacts or feels an affinity with a landscape of any kind can see something that speaks to them as like, oh, I could do this in this place and make that happen. But we just need more of that, more inspiring stories, more inspiring brands, better leaders, better voices, people pushing the sector forward. And the people that aren't involved in the sector, they need to make choices day to day that are better informed by the environment. So don't buy that thing. If you are going to buy it, buy better and less frequently. Make better choices about the food you're eating. Buy less processed rubbish. Buy food as closer to you as you can within the financial envelope you've got, and make more informed choices. And that all builds towards a better society, which all fuels us to be more aware of the environment, and the whole sector will fly at that point.
So understandably, different communities are... I think people worry about change, right? And if you're looking at farmland or you're looking at traditional estates, the reality is that there is a bit of an unknown with this world. And, you know, just look at certain estates where you're stopping things like shoots, for example. That's in almost the DNA of certain communities, normally the 1% of certain communities. But what's the importance of bringing different communities along the journey with you? And I think you kind of just alluded to it really within the storytelling element. But different communities, different people are going to react to different stories and narratives. How have you found that?
Largely impossible. So if you, your wife and wider family were sat around the dinner table and you said, what do you want for dinner? Would you all say the same answer straight away? No, everyone would have a different perspective. So one of my favorite questions I get is, what do local people think? And I always go, who do you mean by local? And I've not had anyone come immediately back with, I have a definition I know. Everyone's like, oh yeah, don't know who I mean. So we mean, when we talk about local people, the direct neighbours of an estate or a place, and the people that are directly impacted by it. So live there, work there, visible sight line of it, directly impacted by it. The best example I ever heard someone say was, well, anyone who's ever been to a place or thinks they might. I was like,
no, that's...
I don't even know how I'd begin to communicate with people. Because would you like to go to this? Oh, you've thought about it. Excellent. I now need to see your opinion. So playfulness aside, when you go interact in a place, and it's why time is really important, you need to listen to the people who love and understand that place. But you can't expect them to think the same thing as each other or as the same thing as we think. So an example would be our estate in Perthshire, in Invergeldy, amazing place. We've got some neighbours who think there should be far fewer deer so trees can come back naturally, natural restoration, regeneration, regrowth. Another neighbouring estate who have a sporting enterprise, which means people pay to come and kill deer on their estate. They think there should be a lot more deer. And then a third estate who's like, the status quo just won't work. We've got the wrong number. We need to lose deer then to improve things. So 3 of the neighbours we've got all want different things. What do I do? All we can do is listen to those views, be respectful about them, where we can find a consensus, try and work forward with that and say, okay, would you like to collaborate on this? Can we share anything? What we never do is try and tell someone else what they should do with their land. So I often get asked, oh, what would you tell ... farmer to do? I was like, absolutely nothing. It's not my place to. If they'd like to ask us questions about what we're doing, they're more than welcome, but it's not my place to preach to somebody else. So what we try and do is open as possible to people, seek representatives from the local community who can speak for a group, because they're better placed to gather 30 or 40 views and us to listen to that one perspective than us to try and help them gather their views. That's just condescending. So listen as much as we can. What's been really great about Invergeldy is we've had lots of challenge, lots of debate, people with different views of the landscape, but ultimately we've got to a social impact strategy that's going to offer a huge amount to that community. So new tracks and pathways to access the estate. Before we bought this estate, lovely family had owned it since the 60s, but it was shut. No one goes in. It was a grouse moor that a very select group of people went to shoot. The point about shooting being important to local communities, I would encourage people, go ask them. Go ask, because that's what I thought. Go ask a community, oh, is sporting big for you? The answer you'll often get is no. A load of rich people come in with stuff they bought elsewhere, shoot something and leave again. It's like, no, it's not for us, but it's in our back garden. So when you actually go and ask these communities and people who live and work in these places how they feel about it, the views are really varied and different. I think things are changing anyway. So I saw a stat recently, and our head of estate management, Charles, comes from a significant sporting background, award-winning in that sector. Shoots are shutting down anyway, irregardless. So families are transitioning. The next generation don't want their land in shoots. You know, the blood sport type mentality is dropping away. And I think what we will see is fewer but more consolidated, very high quality, unique experiences that people can go to, but less and less in terms of number.
It's really interesting. Really mirrors the Jaguar rebrand. This, isn't there? There's heritage, and then there's change, and there's new generations and new blood and new ways of doing things that are coming in. Really, really interesting. As I said, we could probably do 4, 5, 6 hours of conversation, and we will do. The word legacy is a big word, and it often gets I guess, attached to this world slightly. What does the word mean for you? And I guess what kind of legacy are you looking to leave?
I have no idea. So it's rare I get a question that I'm like, oh, I haven't been asked that before. But I went and recorded my friend's podcast, Eleanor Dom's in Belgium. That was a mad story. So she told me she was going to do this podcast and said, when I do it, will you come on? And I didn't think she was going to do it, right? So she launched this podcast, so we agreed to go do it. And her first guest was the Prime Minister of Belgium. And like I was like, Eleanor, what am I doing here? Like, amazing lady. And she said to me, what do you want your legacy to be? And I'd never thought about it. So my quick answers, that are a couple of options, but I don't know how true these are. I haven't thought about them in depth. My first answer is I once heard a quote that said, oh, how would you like to be remembered? And I don't even remember where it's from, but there was a smile and went, I'd just like to be remembered. And I quite like that as an answer.
That's cool.
Well, then I thought, I'm not even sure that's true. So when Eleanor asked me the question on her podcast, my answer was, I want what we've done not to matter. Okay. So, but again, I don't know if I really feel that way. I need to reflect on it and think about it. I think the bit that is true is I was reading the Lorax to my kids, the Dr. Seuss book about how they cut down a load of trees and destroy the environment. And my daughter looked up and went, "You're not allowed to cut down trees, are you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Emma, you are. Unfortunately, loads of it are happening." I said, "But Daddy's going to try and plant a lot more." And she just stopped cold and looked at me and went, "Don't try." And I was like, and I have that on video.
Wow.
My wife was filming me reading the book to her, and I have that on video. So I think, and that's probably the best answer I can give at the moment. When my kids arrived, there was a real change in me, and that's when I stepped away from the public sector. I was like, I want them to be really proud of what I do. So I think that's my holding answer for the moment. We'll come back in a time and I'll think about it.
I love it. So
wait, what do you want yours to be?
Let's not get into that.
See, it's hard, right? It's really hard. You know.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think I'm too young to think about it right now.
That's a kick in the ass, isn't it, for me? Like, Rich, you're plenty old enough to. How old are you?
Age is just a number, right?
Yeah.
But I am. In fact, I'm 33 on Monday.
Congratulations. So I'm 41, and age is just a number. Except when it comes to knee joints, they count the years.
So I was speaking to our mutual friend, the legend that is Gil Martin, last night, and we were saying, well, we've got Rich coming down to Bristol, and I asked him if he could ask you a question live on the podcast, what would it be? And he gave me a couple, actually, and I really like this one. This is Gil's words. The brilliant Mary Colwell has been leading a pioneering push to get natural history added into the national curriculum. If you could add any subject to the curriculum to help change the world for the better, what would it be?
Genuine financial education for people early in life. Rob Gardner's group, Red Start, I think it is, doing some amazing stuff on this. I had a rough childhood. We can save that for a therapist podcast. Money, politics, the important things in life I was explicitly not allowed to talk about, and I had to catch up really, really fast. And I think we're taught a lot of information recognition or recall in school that we don't need anymore. What we need is critical thinking, financial education, and the skills to make better choices when we're younger. So it'd be the finance side of stuff, because Gil's going to take care of the natural history already.
So question part 2 from Gil. In the classic game, what wetland habitat am I? You can tell what Gil gets up to.
Is that what wetland habitat am I, or what is Gil?
Well, funnily enough, we've got a bit of a framing of this. His perspective of me is that I'm an alpine meltwater waterfall, because I'm full of energy and momentum and signaling that spring is coming. Apparently, thanks, Gil. And Gil considers himself as a trickling upland headwater, somewhat lacking in the grandeur and beauty of the meandering river, but playing my part in the big picture nonetheless. What wetland habitat would you be? So
my PhD was actually in measuring and designing things called riffle pool sequences in rivers, which is where the shallows and the deeps as a river moves. So I would go back to, I would be a step pool sequence, which is waterfalls and pools that follow. And then you get the various sides of me. You get the energy and the enthusiasm, and then you get the deeper thinking side of it as well sometimes. So yeah, I'd be a step pool sequence.
Great.
That's a brilliant question. What a so chapters of life, right? When you talk about the different chapters, so as soon as I talk about anything river-wise PhD, the language changes. So strictly speaking, at the time, I was a hydrogeomorphologist, and you talk about the, and there's certain phrases, and this is 20 years ago, but the sinuosity index of natural form gravel bed river systems, you bang, 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 in terms of the cadence of language and things, and Keller's 1958 velocity reversal hypothesis. So language I haven't used in like 20 years, but it's in the back of the memory bank somewhere.
I love that. Very, very good. Well done, Gil. So look, finally, we always end with 3 quick fire questions. what music you listen to at the moment. You're driving around, you're out in nature, you're going to various different estates that you've acquired across the country. What you listen to?
Last Christmas by Wham, my favourite Christmas song. This is in December. Other than that, regularly on the stereo, big fan of 80s music, big fan of 60s as well. A lot of Taylor Swift. Big Taylor Swift fan. That's the one people are most surprised about when they see me. They're like, Taylor Swift. But again, it's different chapters, right? If I'm in the gym, it's angrier. It's UFC or wrestling entrance theme music. It's because you need different fuel for different type of adventures, right? Have
you got a walk-in soundtrack?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah. Do you know? There's a song called "One of a Kind" by Rob Van Dam. He was the wrestler. So that's one of them. Just heavier, angrier stuff. And I love the Arctic Monkeys as well. I mean, I mainly love that because my partner in crime, Dan, our head of environment, hates the Arctic Monkeys. So I'll put that on in the morning when we're getting in the car. Like the start of our podcast, which Penny's changing, I know, but is inspired by a song called "Certain Romance" by the Arctic Monkeys.
Yeah,
it's essentially about how grim it is up north, and it is quite grim up north. Yeah.
Brilliant track. What book or audiobook or podcast would you recommend to listeners?
So I like a book. I came to reading really late in life. So I only started reading. So I got a first and a PhD and only read like the minimum amount you can imagine. I was so fortunate. I started reading when forced to go on holiday with my now in-laws and wife. And I was moaning about being bored. And my wife threw a book at me and said, until you've read that, you're not allowed to moan. And that unlocked an absolute gateway of me realizing, oh, wow, I can get mentored and coached by the best business people in the world by just picking up a book. Why on earth didn't I do that? So I don't read for fiction. I only read that. And I go through phases. So I had a huge phase of data and sports analytics and a lot of cricket stuff this summer this autumn, just gone by. Because what's happening in the natural capital sector really mirrors, for the cricket fans out there, what happened from Test cricket to T20. So it went from being all about longevity and patience and time to the urgency that you need in T20, because investors need a run rate. They need IRR. They need as many runs as quickly as possible, whereas Test cricket is just slow and about legacy in the future. What am I reading at the minute? I'm reading a book called Unreasonable Hospitality. So we've got an amazing ecotourism offering across our estates, and that was recommended to me. What else have I finished? There's tons on the list, but yeah, Unreasonable Hospitality is the one at the moment.
Longest answer that we've had to that one, by the way.
Sorry. I love a book. I just adore books. So all my management team are all getting a selection of 3 books this Christmas. Look out for it.
No, I love it. Really good. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the influence that those books are going to have on them. Final one. If you could partner with any person or brand, who and why?
Yeah, Josh is at the back of the room pointing at his fleece. It's probably Patagonia, I think. That's the obvious go-to. We have some amazing partners in the UK, which I'm super pleased about. Triodos, Knight Frank, Galbraith, Burgess Salmon. You get the most amazing people we get to work with and talk to. But Patagonia is kind of like the holy grail for the environment sector, isn't it?
It is. But I would challenge you in that brand conversation that we've been having around unexpectedness. I would challenge you to think about that answer in the future, because wouldn't it be more interesting to go completely out there?
Well, we were talking about sponsorship before we started, weren't we? And we've had some weird approaches in the past that would have led to oil companies and things like that. And that's the extreme end of that spectrum, right? Saying, okay, we're going to partner with BP or Shell or whatever. And I think it's such an embryonic environment at the moment that something that far would totally erode trust and confidence in what we're doing.
Yeah.
But you are right. There is an exciting nudging at it ground that could do something cooler. I'll do some homework.
Love it. Well, look, thank you so much, Rich. And for anyone who's made it this far, I think it's a good opportunity for you just to plug your podcast to basically get next on the old Spotify whatever podcast platform you listen to your podcast on. What is it?
You can check out the Shoot Room Sessions, a labour of love for us, 80 or so episodes in so far. We've just signed a sponsorship deal with Knight Frank, who are producing it with us moving forward. Super excited for next year. We'll break through 100 episodes just in the start of 2025. So get listening and watching.
Rich, legend. Spuds.
Thank you for having me. What a fun conversation. Appreciate it, Joss.